over where we are at with this new intel that former FBI Director James Comey is indicted. It's coming out from Alex Jones, but it's also coming out from MSNBC, CNN, others. Also, where are we at with Letitia James, John Bolton, Adam Schiff, and others? To help me go through all of this, I have a special guest, Robert. Robert, thank you so much for coming on today.
Awesome to be with you, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
So Robert Gouveia is a podcaster and YouTuber just like myself. He has a show called Watching the Watchers, and he goes through stuff from a legal standpoint. He is a lawyer and helps us to understand everything. Help me understand. I'm seeing it looks like his behavior from the past, his lies from the past have caught up to him. What do you know about this coming indictment of the former FBI director?
The charges relate back to his congressional testimony, where he came out and he was sitting in front of Congress and explaining that the intelligence assessment that they basically created in the aftermath of the 2016 election, which was all intending to smear and set Trump up by creating the Russia collusion hoax, they got together and basically rigged it. We know this as the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. And it was Comey, Clapper, Brennan. We had Obama. We had the whole White House Oval Office was basically working to try to ensnare Trump before he even took office. And there were meetings that occurred in December, right after the election. The election was November 2016. We had an emergency meeting from Obama, brought in all of the parties. Then they changed direction. Basically, the presidential daily briefings were coming into Obama, and there was no evidence of extensive Russian interference like they said there was. And that was the turning point, because then we had emails come out from Clapper, and all of the intelligence community apparatus basically sprung into action and began to create a report. And then they came out with this report just weeks later in early January, I think 7th or 6th, 2017, just a couple of weeks before Trump was going to come in. And they said that there was massive collusion and that essentially, the election was illegitimate. And we heard a lot of people say that. And the idea was to destabilize the administration before it took place, or to call for a new election to kind of see if they could seed this narrative such that they could reverse the loss for Hillary. And what we discovered recently, so a lot of this was kept under wraps for a long time, but then Trump won again, and he now is back. We've got Tulsi Gabbard, and we've got Chuck Grassley's getting his hands on all these documents, the senator from Iowa, and Tulsi is revealing that the internal emails were saying a lot of this was directed right from Obama, and the evidence is just inconsistent. Before Obama gave the go, the intelligence said one thing, then after he gave the go, the intelligence said another thing. And one of the biggest bombshells of the whole conversation is that, if you recall, there was this entire fake dossier called the Steele dossier, which was this report from a former MI6 dude who was explaining that Trump, had some compromat that was in Russian possession, and they were going to come and attack, use that as compromat against the president. It was all fake. It was all made up, and it was all paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign. Okay. So she paid for it through a law firm called Perkins Coie, who outsourced this to another, basically subcontractor called Fusion GPS. They paid for this report, and it was campaign propaganda. Then they tried to seed it in different locations, send it down to the FBI, seed it in the media to create this fake Russia collusion hoax. That report, okay, the Hillary Clinton propaganda, was a part of the pretext. They put that in the intelligence assessment report in a classified annex, and then use that as a basis to justify their activities. So all of that happened, and then Comey comes in because Congress is looking into it, and he gets in front of Congress and he says, oh, the reports are great. Everything was perfectly fine, above board. It's standard intelligence operations. This is a very qualified product. And now Tulsi's he's thinking that Trump is, not going to come back for a second term or be able to unseal any of these things. And now we have seen it. So we've got documents showing that this dude, James Comey, was basically organizing a lot of this stuff and was covering up for contrary reports. All of the intelligence agencies were not in unison. there were strong objections to including the classified annex. And it was so compartmentalized too. They would keep one side, one part of the report written by these people, another side of the report written by these people. And so nobody really knew what it was. They cobbled it together, a handful of people, some of the most corrupt people in America, Brennan, Comey, Clapper, all of them, to shove this through. And then Comey lied about it. Now we've got the evidence. That's, the background on it. And it's been a long time coming, which is why we're so excited, that there may be some justice on this finally.
Switching gears to John Bolton. I remember this guy. He's controversial. Trump's called him dumb, stupid, worthless over and over again. But then out of nowhere, the FBI raids his home, and they're specifically looking for classified documents, maybe tax documents, anything that might leak him to sharing intel that he wasn't allowed to, notes that he had taken in the Oval Office. What's going on with him? Because I'm also hearing very little in the media since his home was raided at 7 a.m. But I am hearing chatter that there are grand juries going on with his name. Any inside info on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And they just unsealed some more records on that case that we just read through on our channel the whole entire PDF, like 60 pages of new materials. And it came from the search warrant from the raid. So originally we just got kind of the nuts and bolts of the search warrant. We're going to go in, look for computers, telephones, electronics, all the things, but we didn't have essentially the affidavit that was justifying the basis for those requests. Like, this is why we need the search warrant, the computer. This is why we need this technology. And so we went through that, and it was juicy, much juicier than I was even expecting. And this is John Bolton. This is not the president. Okay. So Trump got charged for classified documents being in his possession. They said he was not allowed to have those materials. He was the president. Okay. He ran the executive branch. So the Constitution says he has the right to the opinions of his executives. It's in there, right? It's pretty clear and codified. And he's also got the Presidential Records Act that he could argue that these were falling within, or he's got the ability to declassify materials, all of these things. Okay. But he was put through the ringer, and he was charged with several different violations for possession of classified materials and retention of defense information and all sorts of, the various charges. Now, Bolton was the national security advisor at one point for President Trump for about, I think over a year, like from 2018 to 2019, not a long time, and then was out. And what we're learning is after he came out, he started to write a manuscript about what he was, his time. I think he said, the room it happened in was going to be the name of the manuscript. And so he starts sending that over to the intelligence agencies to get them to kind of, stamp off on it. And they return it back and they say, hey man, you've got like classified documents throughout the wazoo. I mean, it is filled to the brim. So you got to cut all this stuff out of your book. And then they start notifying his attorney, hey, when John Bolton left the federal employ, he signed these documents and these forms that he would return his notes. He wouldn't keep any classified documents. They got all these signatures, right? Well, what ended up happening is the raid occurred, and the affidavit explains that he had all sorts of stuff. And the biggest bombshell highlight was weapons of mass destruction classified materials. There was a bunch of other things, United Nations classified materials, all sorts of items, but weapons of mass destruction was listed there in the inventory of, binders that they got. So we saw them all coming out with boxes and binders. There was some very, very juicy stuff in there. And one of the most surreal aspects of the whole thing was apparently some foreign entity hacked his AOL email account. All right. So the national security advisor had an AOL email, and in the affidavit, a huge portion of it is redacted, like 10 to 15 pages. So you can't see exactly what's going on. But the headline is at the top of the section, NSA AOL hacked by foreign entity, right? We don't know what it is, but basically you can go through and you can presume by just reading the rest of the context of the document that they were just chronicling all of the classified materials. It's like, we're missing something in this affidavit. It's what are they looking for? It was in his AOL account. So basically, presumably he was sending classified emails to himself on an AOL account. And it's like the national security advisor of the United States is doing that. I mean, how is this even possible if he's supposed to be securing America, right? And he's sending these things through AOL. And I don't know how robust AOL security is, but I can't imagine it's that good. So pretty shocking stuff. And it, was basically dead to rights. I mean, they came in, it was all in his possession. He's not the president. He doesn't have any of those same powers. He can't retain any of those things. And they got him. So we fully expect he'll be charged probably with the same charges, the same types of statutes that President Trump was charged with. And in the affidavit, they also, they're showing knowledge. He knows about this. Not only did he sign the forms, but he's also giving interviews after interview about how sensitive national security information is. And he was screaming about Trump and Pete Hegseth and Signalgate and all of that, very upset about it. And you're like, John, you've got nuclear secrets in your closet, in your home or your office. So a bizarre situation, but I would imagine this problem is pretty extensive. And I think it also shows the arrogance of these people. It's like, get your own house in order before you start screaming that President Trump should be in prison when he had full entitlement to those documents.
Yeah. Okay. I want to hear about Letitia James, but I got one follow-up question. Okay. So is it fair to say that Trump was okay with classified because he was the actual president? Joe Biden was okay, even though he took stuff as a senator and a vice president because he was the current president during his time. But John Bolton has no connection to the president. He's probably in big, big trouble.
Yeah, I think that's directionally accurate. I think that you could even make the argument that Joe Biden as a senator should have been prosecuted for those acts, because at the time of the retention, he was not a senator. And so the fact that he became the president doesn't backdate his power to do those things.
But they didn't have any incentive to go after him as the sitting president. I know our side, the left or the right wanted, but the DOJ under him, they're going, he's the president. We're not going to embarrass the office. He's on our team. We're not going to go after charges.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So yeah, Merrick Garland appoints Robert Hur. Robert Hur, as we know, writes the infamous report that Joe Biden is like a nice elderly man who doesn't know where he is or whatever he said. And that doesn't support the charges. And of course, if it was President Trump, nobody would ever give him the benefit of any doubt and anything like that. So I think there's many layers to that. There is a constitutional question about whether you can even prosecute a sitting president because they're kind of the root power of that prosecutorial entity. So, but again, the question could be, well, you just wait until after the person leaves office and charge them for that offense. But they ultimately, decided not to do that. And I think there is some sympathy for it. I think a lot of people have recognized now in the aftermath that Joe Biden is mentally, not all there, and maybe they wouldn't get a conviction.
Yeah, it turns out he was a feeble old man with a weak memory, right? So everybody's looking for the truth. It's the reason we go on the news. It's the reason we read articles. But the reality is everybody writes or delivers the news through their own prism of truth. For example, did you know that the Department of Justice is now looking to open an active investigation into George Soros and the Open Foundation? Some people don't know that's happening. President Trump slams ABC News for bringing back Jimmy Kimmel, saying, I didn't try to threaten his freedom of speech. He has terrible ratings. Well, you can see from the bias of the news and who's actually reporting that Jimmy Kimmel was brought back and President Trump is being called a dictator. Jimmy Kimmel is being called beloved, and that MAGA is trampling all over his freedom of speech. But as you can see, it's mostly the left writing this nonsense, not the right. You need to know the bias behind the news you consume. Also, did you know that 2 million illegal immigrants have self-deported because they're afraid of Trump? They know that their days are numbered and that there's no opportunity for them here. This is America first. That's what we're doing going forward. So one reason I like Ground News is you get the unbiased reaction. And if you believe there's bias, you can use their blind spot to better understand. Now, I want you to head on over to ground.news/Stephen, and you can get 40% off your subscription of Vantage. That's right. Go to ground.news/Stephen or snap the QR code to save and make sure that you are informed and that you know where your news is coming from. You mentioned something about Tyler Robinson having a hearing coming up on the 29th. Of course, you'll cover it. I'll cover it. But Where are we at with that? Because a lot of people are frustrated that we're not seeing more evidence. Was there an autopsy report? Was he shot from the front or the back? Where's the video? Why did you clip off certain part? Is this because they're still going after people and trying to get a conviction? Or is it because they're just rotten and don't want us to have the juicy info?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a little bit of truth to all of that.
Okay.
That, the prosecution is happening for Tyler Robinson. I think that there's probably a strong pull within the agencies to just, this is it. Okay. It's a nice, put a little button, little wrap this present up, put a bow on it. It's Tyler Robinson. Shut up. Stop asking questions about anything else. And we'll just leave it there. Like one crazed dude, whose motive is still under investigation or whatever. You just kind of wrap it up and set it aside. Now, I would hope, I think that a full and extensive and thorough prosecution from our FBI, from our prosecutors who really do want to get to the bottom of what is causing this person to behave this way, have these sudden shifts where they become murderous assassins, then there's a lot of other areas and items to investigate, which of course is anybody who helped this dude or was encouraging this dude or was, persuading this dude remotely in the Discord servers, what was going on the video games. I know that they're looking into these weird video games that apparently he was playing and chatting with people and having, intercourse with furry animals and all sorts of bizarre things. So it's something that I think has a lot of tentacles that can, continue to be investigated, but we are still very early in this case. And I am also frustrated. I share many of the same frustrations. There's a lot of tensions about, that story sounds plausible. This story sounds plausible, but when you put them together, that doesn't sound plausible. And so there's some contradictions that I think are well worth fleshing out, but we are still pretty early. And what we like to do is to, just like in court, look at the facts that are in evidence and look at the documents and look at what the authorities are saying. And of course, we'll speculate and see where those can go, but we don't want to engage in just pure speculation and just come up with, kind of outlandish theories. So we're waiting a bit for more materials to come out, but where we're at, to your original question, is, remember, Charlie was shot on 9/10. Okay, so September 10th. Took about 33 hours, 3 days. They caught the guy, Tyler Robinson. He got his arraignment. So his first court date was on September 16th, and then he got rescheduled for a 9/29 preliminary hearing. And that is due to the direct complaint. Okay, so as I was explaining before, he's a violent person. They needed to hold him immediately. So they had a special agent just say, here's the evidence that we've got right now. We don't have a lot. We just have to race to get stuff on paper. It's not going to be everything by any stretch. It's not going to be, the end of the story, but we just got to get this dude charged. Now, then they've got some time to impanel the grand jury because nobody was expecting Charlie to be assassinated. So they got to go convene a grand jury, bring everybody together and present the evidence to them directly. He'll be indicted, no question. So once that indictment comes, then they'll just basically sub it out. So they'll take the complaint away. They'll scratch this. We don't need this anymore. Drop the criminal indictment down. And then the case will proceed from there. And then that's where we'll start to enter kind of the secondary phase of a criminal prosecution. We'll have established probable cause. The prosecution will be going towards trial. Then he'll get a defense attorney. The defense attorney will come in, start asking for discovery, start asking for police reports and coroner's reports and all of these additional materials. But whether we see any of it is still yet to be seen. And I was looking up the Utah coroner's confidentiality laws, and they're pretty extensive. So if Erica Kirk basically is not going to, or the family is not going to release the coroner's report or the medical, the OME medical exam report, then we're probably not going to see it. And I could also expect that the judge might seal a bunch of things depending on the requests from the Kirk family and, what they as victims of this crime want to do. And they may not want a lot of materials coming out, or maybe they will, but there'll be a long process where the prosecution is sending things back and forth. And we've seen this with other assassins and assassination attempts with the Ryan Ruth trial, the guy who tried to shoot Trump on the golf course. He submitted a bunch of, bizarre, outlandish defenses, but you got to see some context and fill in the gaps, right? They're reading the evidence and they're writing motions about the evidence. We can't see the evidence exactly, but we can see what they're writing about. So we can start to piece together what's happening. And in terms of timeline, murder trials, in this case, they're seeking the death penalty. They can take a long time. They can take years before you get to a final conclusion. or they can go pretty quickly. And in the George Floyd case with the Derek Chauvin trial, that was a pretty quick trial. I mean, we went from, I think it was May 2020 when George Floyd died until about 9 months later, we had the full trial for Derek Chauvin. So 9 months from now, depending on how quickly Utah prosecutors want to push this through, or take this to a trial, or this maybe I don't know. I don't know that they'll offer this guy a plea deal or anything like that, but he may want to just plead guilty, and plead to the court in hopes of avoiding the death penalty or something like that. So we've got a long road ahead, and I know it is frustrating. From my perspective too, I've watched a ton of videos from the tactical experts talking about body plates and all, everybody's doing their analysis on it.
Yeah.
And of course, we're going to continue to do that, but we're waiting for some more documents to hit the court docket that hopefully shed some light on this.
Okay. Now, speaking of documents is what got Letitia James in trouble. So you've got Sam Antar, this little Jewish guy from New York who just can't stand that she got away with fraud. He doesn't even really like Donald Trump, but he presents all this to the FBI. They say, we've got to open an investigation up in New York. Then my understanding is Virginia opened a grand jury. Where are we at with Letitia James? Because I believe just based on the documents I've seen, she's in trouble. And I think a lot of people know she's in trouble. Where are we at with her?
Yeah, great question. And we love Sam Antar, man. That guy's like a pit bull. He just keeps digging and digging, and it's great. And I think he's on to the meats of the entire case. He's got the documents, and he's showing exactly where the fraud was, where the manipulations were. And Letitia, like others, there may be grand juries being formed or not, probably are. And her statute of limitations, I don't recall when those starting dates were, but I'm not sure that there's the same urgency with her. Some of these other guys have, much older cases like, Schiff and Comey. I mean, he testified 5 years ago in front of Congress. So I'm not sure there's the same exact urgency with Letitia. Maybe there is, but grand juries are probably being contemplated, if not formed outright. And I think Letitia knows she's in big trouble, because I saw her on an interview with Joy Reid, and she was just basically screaming about how Trump was weaponizing the government against her and launching all these prosecutions against her. And I'm thinking, that's pretty rich. Was she around for the last 4 years when she was literally doing that? And if you remember her case, I mean, what makes this so ridiculous is she's now saying, I'm being attacked for basic, common oversight. My mortgage fraud was not actually fraud. It was just, actually, I haven't really heard good explanations from them on this, whether it's a clerical error, or we've seen some competing estimates and some other emails where they're saying, oh no, I'm going to use that as a second home. But she signed the documents at the end of the day that said primary residence, especially for that Virginia property. And all of this, I think, is pretty amazing from the state law enforcement attorney general, the highest law enforcement agent in the state of New York, for not being capable of filling out financial documents appropriately, because she launched a $500 million civil lawsuit against President Trump, was successful at first until she just lost that case on appeal. Of course, she is now appealing that to the highest court in New York because she wants to get that judgment back. But she did that and brought a $500 million case against the president, claiming that he was committing financial fraud, saying that subjective evaluations and valuations of Trump's residence, of Trump's properties, was not accurate. Okay, so she was substituting her judgment for private banks, for the president, who gave a statement of financial interests that had disclaimers on them saying, right, this is our estimate of our property values. You can do your own estimate, bank. And they did. Nobody was defrauded. Nobody was harmed. Nobody was even victimized. Nobody even complained about it. Tish went in there and tried to go find something where there wasn't. And her buddy, Alvin Bragg, right next door, also in New York, who is the criminal prosecutor, brought 34 felony counts against President Trump for writing checks and giving them to his lawyer. So, and they had to, I mean, that case was ridiculous. They had to go and use obscure provisions like subsection E, other crimes, and, find some perverse statutes to even bring the charges in the first place. Then their star witness was Michael Cohen, a convicted perjurer, and the list goes on and on. So this is what New York does, is they specifically target people and they go after them. to try to take them off the field, in this case, right before the election. So now Tish has been caught red-handed, signing the documents, committing fraud, getting a benefit of the lower interest rates, and re-upping that, right? I mean, I think on the statute of limitations argument, you could say every month she pays her mortgage at the discounted rate. That's an extension of the crime. So I think that the indictment process, could happen soon or not so soon, but we certainly want to see justice sooner rather than later. And we were, given the administration the appropriate time and the runway to do their investigations and create the cases that they need to bring. And, I think we're about 9 months in now. We're getting close to that year mark. And so it's about time to start seeing some of these cases be filed.
Yeah. My favorite part of that trial was the written documentation from Stormy Daniel that she didn't sleep with Donald Trump, but then also that he was so good in bed that she fainted. Like a porn star fainted. This guy's so good in bed. So such a contradiction. Is there any new update on Adam Schiff? Otherwise, I want to move on to Google.
I think mostly in the same bucket, same category, probably under grand jury investigation, or maybe going to be indicted at some point. But I haven't seen any of the rumor mill coming out with any sourcing saying that it's imminent, but I'm sure they're working on it.
Okay. This Google one really surprised me because on the one hand, you have Kamala Harris saying, oh, Donald Trump is trying to control speech. He got Jimmy Kimmel kicked off, even though now it turns out that it was these little networks and advertisers that said, we don't want to advertise on this guy's show if he's going to say that everyone that's MAGA is a killer like Tyler Robinson. But then at that same time, Google comes out and admits, yeah, we censored a lot of people over a lot of topics, and we did it at the behest of the Joe Biden White House. What's up with that situation?
It's nice to see them come out and say this. It's something that we all already knew. I mean, we were on YouTube after January 6th. They demonetized our entire channel. They said you're harmful and dangerous. We got strikes. We got COVID medical misinformation strikes. All of that was right after Joe Biden came into power. We saw the whole, sea change happen immediately, and YouTube started to come after people. So, we were a part of that. They also eliminated our entire Discord. We had a big chat community. Everybody was talking about all sorts of stuff. They just nuked it right away. No explanation. And what we saw in the aftermath of that was the Twitter files came out from Elon after he bought Twitter. We saw the Facebook files. Jim Jordan and some of the other people were releasing those records. And now Google's coming out and admitting it. But the pattern was the same. And we read through the emails. We saw Elvis Chan. He was an FBI special agent in California, and he was fielding a lot of these requests and sending emails back and forth and flagging accounts. These people are saying illegal things, bad things, sending the emails to all the big tech companies. And the same thing was happening basically across the board. And it wasn't just Elvis Chan. There was Rob Flaherty was the other guy coming out of the White House, and the White House Executive Office of the President emails have this Biden administration social media communications, lunatic sending threatening emails. Basically, I've asked you repeatedly to take this post down. I check tomorrow. The posts are still up. Just harassing these social media companies until they bend and buckle and do what the administration wants. And, I appreciate these big tech companies. I use the technology that they have created every day, right? We all use these things. And so I have a little bit of empathy for them in that when you have the White House, when you have the government coming in and attacking you repeatedly, like we're going to take your whole business down. Like we're going to destroy you. They can do that, right? This is the scary thing about government. And for these people to sit there and call us fascists while their government is trying to, intertwine themselves with big business such that they can control the entire nation, that's fascism. I mean, that's exactly what they're doing to try to steal our First Amendment rights away from us. And it was so perverted because, look, if the social media companies want to suspend you or ban you or whatever, they don't want your content on your platform, you can make the argument, that's fine. It's a private company. And, we got freedom of association in America. We want to preserve that. That's a part of the First Amendment too. So fine. There'll be market consequences against that, just like you mentioned with Jimmy Kimmel and how he got fired. So if they want to do that, that's fine. But the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, says the government cannot do that to us. And they were just trying to outsource their censorship to these big tech companies so that they didn't have to do the dirty work. And now Google's admitting it. And I'm starting to see, some other people are coming back on board, but it feels like a nice acknowledgement. But there was a lot of damage, man. There was millions or billions of dollars of damages that they caused by not allowing people to speak. There are people that are dead because they were censoring real factual COVID information that should have been shared so people could have an open conversation about it. So I know there's a lot of talk about Section 230 and how, the law can maybe be changed so that we can preserve our free speech on the internet. But there was a very sick cycle that the social media companies went into, and it was our government that was putting their thumb on the scale because they didn't like what we were saying. And everything we were saying turned out to be factually true, and we're allowed to express those opinions. So I'm happy to see it. I would like, Mark Zuckerberg, I remember, I think he gave like almost $500 million for one of those elections against Trump. So maybe he can put up another $500 million, for a free speech fund or for, a digital bill of rights or something like that. And they can make good on what they did to violate the First Amendment for millions and millions around America.
Yeah. It was nice to read that. Zuckerberg has said the same thing. Like they were putting tremendous pressure on me to shut people down. So it doesn't correct the wrong, but at least they've admitted it and moved forward. And Trump is allowing that free speech. I mean, there's probably no more hate against one human being than against Donald Trump, and he allows it. Same thing with Elon Musk. They get to the point where they're like, you should be censoring more. And he's like, welcome to freedom of speech in the public market, So yep. Final question. I appreciate you coming on. I particularly would like to see Adam Schiff be in trouble. Wouldn't you say, just based on what you saw with Letitia James? I mean, he signed the documents. He's a smart guy. He's supposedly a brilliant lawyer who, has been a congressman and a senator. And you're telling me he doesn't know how to fill out paperwork correctly?
Yeah, he's also a real nasty one that is on their side. He's been around for a long time. And if you remember, part of these new releases that we got from Tulsi, they were explaining that Adam Schiff thought he was going to be the CIA director. He was working closely with Hillary Clinton. And so he was like a stone's throw away from running the whole thing, right? And that is a real scary thought because even in the aftermath of the election, once Trump won, they were explaining, his whole office was basically despondent. They were just melting down. They had to create and facilitate this Russian collusion hoax. The guy lied through his teeth many times, got censured for it in Congress. And so I'd like to see him charged for those crimes, obviously. But, the mortgage stuff, I agree. But how you can run the CIA, you can be the national, most intelligent person nationally in the whole country, and you can't even fill out your mortgage documents. And I think they just, they all think that they're untouchable. There's just arrogance. And there have thus far been no consequences for any of it, right? They just kind of keep existing. So that's why we're excited to see what this new DOJ will do and what the president will lead us to.
Yeah. Well, I guess Adam Schiff's best defense will be something like, it could be a jab at Letitia James. Well, at least I didn't say I married my dad,
Right.
I can't believe she wrote down that she had married her own dad, but at least Adam Schiff didn't marry his own dad. Robert, thank you so much for coming on. If people want to catch you, I'm going to put a direct link to your YouTube, but if they want to follow you on X, where can I point them?
Yeah, just my name at Rob Gouveia ESQ on X as well. And we've got a bunch of our case files over at our Substack at robertgouveia.substack.com, posting a bunch of PDFs there as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll have you on again in the future. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it, man.